It was a warm summer evening in the heart of the Ozark Mountains, and my fiancée and I had embarked on a camping adventure in the wilds of Arkansas. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the dense forest. Our campsite, nestled beside a serene, babbling creek, seemed like the perfect escape from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. Little did we know that this tranquil setting would soon become the backdrop for a nightmarish ordeal. As the day turned to dusk, we decided to fire up the grill and prepare a simple dinner. The smell of sizzling burgers and the crackling of the campfire filled the air, creating a sense of comfort and coziness. We were in our own little world, content and oblivious to the horrors that awaited us. That's when it happened, a sound that shattered the peaceful ambience of our campsite, a gut-wrenching scream, a plea for help that echoed through the trees. My heart raced as I dropped the spatula and exchanged a bewildered glance with my fiancée. Without a second thought, we abandoned our cooking and rushed in the direction of the desperate cries. Following the anguished screams through the dimly lit forest, we stumbled upon a neighboring campsite. The scene that greeted us was nightmarish. A disheveled man, clearly inebriated, stood in a pool of his own blood, his face contorted in pain and panic. His shirt was stained crimson, and the metallic smell of blood hung heavy in the air. My fiancée, blessed with a steadier disposition than my own, took immediate action. She swiftly retrieved a first aid kit from our camping gear while I tried to assess the situation. It was evident that the man had suffered a grievous injury. His ankle bore a deep, jagged wound, from which blood spurted like a grotesque fountain. Every pulsating jet of crimson sent shivers down my spine, for I had always been squeamish about the sight of blood. With trembling hands, my fiancée wrapped a tourniquet around the injured man's ankle, desperately trying to stem the relentless flow of blood. It was a gruesome sight, one that I could hardly bear to witness. Panic surged within me, threatening to overwhelm my senses, but there was no time for hesitation. I knew we needed to act swiftly to save this man's life. I grabbed my phone, intending to dial 911 and summon an ambulance to this remote wilderness. But as I pressed the buttons, I was met with the disheartening realization that there was no cell service in this remote part of the forest. Desperation clawed at me, threatening to paralyze my every move. My fiancée, her face a mask of determination, continued her efforts to control the bleeding. With every passing second, the man grew weaker, his complexion turning an ashen shade of gray. It was a race against time, and I could feel the icy fingers of fear tightening around my heart. In that moment, I made a split-second decision, a choice driven by sheer instinct and the desperate need to save a life. I turned to my fiancée and shouted over the cacophony of panic and despair, "I'll drive him to the hospital. It's our only chance." She nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. With trembling hands, I helped load the injured man into his truck, a vehicle I had never driven before. It was a surreal moment, blood-smeared and chaotic, as I maneuvered the unfamiliar vehicle onto the forest trail. The engine roared to life, and I sped away from the campsite, my mind a whirlwind of terror and determination. Blood still stained the floor mat beside me, a grim reminder of the man's life hanging in the balance. I pushed the accelerator to the floor, navigating the winding forest roads with a single purpose: get to the hospital as fast as humanly possible. As I raced through the darkened forest, adrenaline surged through my veins, overriding the queasiness that blood had always induced in me. The man in the passenger seat groaned in agony, his voice growing weaker with each passing moment. The sense of urgency was palpable, and the weight of responsibility bore down on me like an anvil. I knew there was a hospital roughly 20 miles away, and every mile felt like an eternity. The winding roads seemed to go on forever, and the darkness of the forest was oppressive. All I could think of was the life hanging in the balance, the man's fading breath, and the stark realization that there was no turning back. Time blurred as I raced against the clock. The man's condition worsened by the minute, his slurred speech and hints of impending unconsciousness a grim reminder of the dire situation. I clenched the steering wheel, my knuckles white with tension, and prayed that we would reach the hospital in time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the distant glow of civilization appeared on the horizon. The hospital loomed into view, a beacon of hope in the midst of darkness. I pulled into the emergency entrance, my heart pounding in my chest as I honked the horn, summoning medical assistance. A team of nurses and doctors rushed out, their faces a mix of surprise and urgency as they saw the man's condition. They whisked him away on a gurney, disappearing into the brightly lit emergency room. I was left with a profound sense of relief mixed with lingering dread, the image of the man's blood pooling on the floor mat burned into my memory. Hours passed as we anxiously waited in the hospital's sterile waiting room. The minutes felt like hours, each one dragging by as we grappled with the enormity of what had transpired. Finally, a weary-looking doctor emerged from the depths of the hospital, his face etched with fatigue. He approached us, and his words would forever be etched into my memory. "You saved his life," he said solemnly. "If you hadn't brought him here as quickly as you did, he would have bled out and died. Your quick thinking made all the difference." It was a bittersweet moment, a blend of relief and a haunting realization of the fragility of life. We had ventured into the wilderness seeking adventure and serenity, but instead, we had been thrust into a life-and-death struggle, and miraculously emerged as saviors. The man, with 18 stitches in his ankle, eventually returned to the waiting room around 10:30 p.m. He was pale and weak, but his eyes held a deep gratitude that words could not convey. He thanked us profusely, his voice trembling with emotion, and we exchanged names and contact information. It was a surreal reunion, a reminder that the bonds forged in moments of crisis can be among the strongest. As we left the hospital, my fiancée and I exchanged a long, silent glance. We had experienced a harrowing ordeal that had pushed us to our limits, both physically and emotionally. Blood, a sight that had always made me squeamish, had been a constant presence throughout the night, a stark reminder of the fragility of life. We headed back to our campsite, our minds still reeling from the events of that fateful evening. It was an eerie feeling, returning to the scene of the incident, the forest now cloaked in an unsettling silence. We had saved a man's life, but the memory of that night would forever be etched in our minds, a haunting reminder of the unexpected horrors that can unfold in the wilderness, and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. The man's dog, a loyal companion who had witnessed the entire ordeal, greeted us with a mixture of excitement and confusion. We tried our best to have a normal evening, to recapture the sense of peace and serenity that had drawn us to this remote campsite in the first place. But the shadows of the night lingered, and the forest seemed to whisper its secrets, a reminder that darkness could descend at any moment. As the stars shone overhead, we sat by the campfire, the crackling flames casting flickering shadows that danced like phantoms in the night. We recounted the events of the evening, each word heavy with the weight of what we had experienced. It was a story that would forever bind us, a tale of courage and compassion in the face of unimaginable terror. And as we lay in our tent, the sounds of the forest surrounding us, I couldn't help but reflect on the fragility of life and the randomness of fate. We had been thrust into a nightmare, a scenario we had never anticipated, and yet we had risen to the occasion, making choices that had saved a man's life. It was a chilling reminder that in the darkest of moments, ordinary people can become heroes, and the line between life and death can be razor-thin. That night, as I closed my eyes and tried to find solace in sleep, the image of the blood-smeared floor mat and the desperate cries for help haunted my dreams. The forest whispered its secrets in the darkness, a reminder that the wilderness could be both beautiful and unforgiving, a place where the boundaries between life and death were blurred, and where the strength of the human spirit could be tested in the most harrowing of ways. I can still feel the chill running down my spine when I think about that fateful trip to Grand Gulch. It was supposed to be a 5-day adventure with my parents, but it turned into a nightmare. As we attempted to exit the canyon, we quickly realized that the route was far more treacherous than we had anticipated. There was no clear trail, and the desolation around us was suffocating. Our water supply was rapidly dwindling, and we had left the safety of the water pockets far below in the canyon. That night, we found ourselves huddled under a pinyon pine, sharing our last power bars, hoping that we'd find water the next day. The desert stretched on endlessly, and desperation gnawed at us. Morning finally came, and with it, a faint road. It offered a glimmer of hope, and we followed it, our parched throats burning with each step. We had stashed a shuttle bike earlier for someone to ride the last 8 miles to our van, a small comfort in our dire situation. But then, as the rain began to fall, so did our spirits. It was a downpour, and we were ecstatic, desperately trying to catch raindrops on our tongues. We walked for what seemed like an eternity, wondering where our ride was. Finally, we stumbled upon a primitive and eerily empty parking lot, except for our van. Panic set in as we watched my stepdad frantically trying to start it. A dead battery. With no other option, he mounted the shuttle bike and rode through thick mud for 6 more agonizing miles to the highway, hoping to flag down help. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, a ranger appeared out of nowhere, patrolling the area. Relief washed over us, but the dread lingered. We got a tow and made it to Blanding, Utah, while we got the van running again. For an 11-year-old like me, it was a terrifying ordeal I'll never forget. The desolation, the thirst, the van stranded in the wilderness, it felt like a horror story come to life. The wind whispered through the towering trees, carrying with it an eerie, foreboding chill. My wife and I had embarked on a week-long camping trip to celebrate our anniversary, seeking a peaceful escape from the chaos of everyday life. Little did we know, our idyllic getaway would soon turn into a harrowing ordeal that would haunt us for years to come. As we arrived at the campsite on that fateful Saturday afternoon, a gnawing unease settled in my stomach. The campground office door bore a warning sign that sent shivers down my spine. It wasn't a typical caution about wildlife, this one spoke of a bear that had been spotted in the vicinity. It was the kind of sign that made you question your decision to be there in the first place. We checked in, and I asked the ranger about the bear. He seemed strangely nonchalant, assuring us that such occurrences were rare and that taking precautions like stowing away our food and maintaining a clean campsite should keep us safe. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, that the bear's presence here was no mere coincidence. Night fell, and the moon cast eerie shadows across our campsite. Just as darkness enveloped the forest, we heard it, a low, guttural growl echoing through the trees. The bear had arrived, like clockwork, every 12 hours, as if it were marking time in a sinister countdown. Panic surged through my veins as the beast approached our campsite with unwavering determination. We locked ourselves in the car that first night, trembling with fear. The bear circled our campsite, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground beneath us. Its growls and occasional roars sent shivers down our spines, and we clung to each other, praying for morning to come. The following day, the park manager assured us that the bear had not been seen for a full day and that it was safe to return to our campsite. But something in his tone, in the way he dismissed our concerns, set off alarm bells in my head. We couldn't trust him, and the thought of returning to our tent filled me with dread. That night, as the darkness descended once more, we found ourselves back in the confines of our car, the bear's presence an unrelenting menace. I couldn't help but wonder why they hadn't moved us to a safer location. There were other vacant sites, but for some reason, they kept us right here, at the mercy of this relentless, nocturnal intruder. On Tuesday, our anniversary, rain began to fall in torrents. We had hoped for a romantic evening by the campfire, grilling up the steak we had brought to celebrate. But the downpour was relentless, turning our campsite into a muddy, desolate wasteland. We sought refuge in the car once more, resigned to the fact that our anniversary plans were ruined. The pattering rain on the roof served as a melancholic soundtrack to our disappointment. As the hours passed, we grew hungry, and our dreams of a steak dinner faded into nothingness. Desperation drove us to seek shelter at a nearby hotel. We dined at their restaurant, the sterile ambience a stark contrast to the wilderness we had initially longed for. It was a far cry from the anniversary celebration we had envisioned, but at least we were dry and safe from the relentless bear. Wednesday arrived with a merciless continuation of the rain. I awoke early, my toe throbbing with an intensity that matched the dismal weather outside. Ignoring the pain, I stumbled through the rain-soaked forest toward the car, hoping to distract myself with my phone. As I reached the car and fumbled for my phone, I noticed a voicemail notification. It was from my stepmother, and the message had been left late the previous night. Her voice trembled as she explained that she had rushed my father to the hospital. His back pain had become unbearable, and the doctors suspected something far more sinister, cancer. My heart sank, the weight of her words crushing me. The rain outside seemed to mirror the storm raging within my soul. The news about my father's health was a devastating blow, and I felt helpless being so far away from him. But the misery didn't stop there. As I tried to shake off the distressing voicemail, I realized that my throbbing toe was not just a minor inconvenience. It was agonizing, a relentless pain that shot through my foot with each step. With great effort, I managed to hobble back to our campsite, where my wife helped me into the car. We decided that, given my inability to walk and the grim weather forecast that showed no signs of relenting, it was best to cut our trip short and head back home. The thought of enduring days of rain, coupled with the pain in my toe, was too much to bear. The drive home was an excruciating ordeal. My infected toe throbbed with every mile, and the rain seemed to follow us, as if it were a relentless omen of the misfortune that had befallen us. The journey, which had started with such anticipation and hope, now felt like a never-ending nightmare. We finally arrived home, weary and battered, our anniversary celebration reduced to a haunting memory. The pain in my toe continued to torment me for 3 more agonizing days, a constant reminder of the surreal events that had unfolded during what should have been a joyous getaway. In the weeks that followed, my father's condition remained uncertain. The fear of cancer loomed over our family, casting a long shadow of uncertainty and dread. And the memory of that relentless bear, lurking in the darkness of the forest, continued to haunt my dreams, a symbol of the unexpected horrors that can lurk in the most peaceful of places. As I reflect on that ill-fated camping trip, I am reminded that life is often unpredictable and filled with challenges we could never anticipate. It is a journey fraught with moments of fear, pain, and heartache, but it is also a journey filled with love, resilience, and the unwavering support of those we hold dear. And so, we press on, facing whatever obstacles lie ahead, knowing that even in the darkest of times, there is a glimmer of hope that can guide us through the wilderness of our lives.